Well, Lloyd, today we have a wonderful show. We have an amazing man joining us from LA area. He is the most incredible mediator, and he is a conflict resolver, a wonderful negotiator. Let me tell you a little bit about Jay Berman. I think I must have met him probably maybe 20 years ago. I've been mediating for 35 years. He's been mediating for 26. Of course, he's a baby compared to me, but he is just amazing. So Jay Berman began as a full-time mediator 26 years ago, and he has done at least 2,500 mediations that he's done successfully. And he's an American Arbitration Association master mediator. He is a teacher of mediation. He is a distinguished fellow with the International Academy of Mediators. He is also an expert with the United Nations developmental programs dealing with conflict resolution. And he's a distinguished neutral in the California Daily Journal, which is the legal newspaper for the entire state of California. And he is just, I could go on and on, all these things that he's done, but I want to get into the nitty gritty. He is a respected trainer as well. And I think that's really important, to be able to train new mediators, because that's what we're looking at, finding new ways to find solutions instead of litigation. So founded the American Institute of Mediation after 7 years of being the director of the Pepperdine Law School's mediating the litigated case, which I took many, many years ago. And he has trained mediators and judges and lawyers across the country and through New Zealand, Australia, and I think he should go to the moon. He can do it there too. And he's published many, many articles. And the exciting thing is in 2021, he's going to have 2 books with the American Bar Association that are coming out. So I'm really glad that we have this chance to talk with you, Lee, and share ideas. It's wonderful. So why don't you start out, Jay, and tell us a little bit about how you even got into mediation. Why did you choose to become a mediator?
It's funny, Mari. First of all, thank you for that awfully kind introduction and everything. I always thought that I first got into mediation because I was good with conflict. I was comfortable in the middle of it. I would step into it naturally. What I really learned as I started doing this for a couple of years is I hate conflict. I absolutely despise it. And it makes me want to just like put a pillow over my head and hide from it sometimes. But what I've learned is that I've got a skill set that helps me extinguish it and make it go away. And that's what I like about this profession. That's what drew me to it. It's what keeps me in it. But I learned it's really how much I dislike it that made me say, I want to do that for a living.
Exactly. I grew up and my parents worked together for like 50 years. And you can imagine when you sleep together and you eat together and you work together, there was a lot of conflict. So I was the baby.
Mine did that too. We have that in common.
Yeah. So when I was the baby, I was always being the little mediator. Go love up daddy. Go love up mommy. And I realized that as I got into it too, is that I became a lawyer because in those years I thought, that's a neat thing to do, to go and study and research cases and argue for the betterment of the world. But then I hated it. I wanted to be the mediator, the solutioneer, so to speak. So we do have that in common. That's right.
That's neat. That is. Yeah.
Jay, we have been through so much in this past year with the pandemic, which caused a lot of conflict, whether people wanted to wear a mask or not. And of course, with politics, whether you're Republican or Democrat or whatever, we've had so much conflict. How can we, deal with that now, hopefully, as we're moving ahead? How can we kind of create some harmony?
Mari, I think you're right. I think we're more polarized than I can ever remember us. I'm sure they would have said that through the decades and the centuries, but this we've gotten really bad. And I think what's happened, the cause of it, I think, in part, is that we have a lot of folks who benefit by us all being in conflict. And I think the first thing that we can do about it is be mindful of that they're trying to draw eyeballs to their websites and their newscasts and their newspapers and whatever, because the more conflict there is, the more advertising that they can sell and things like that. So I think first we have to be mindful that we're kind of pawns in that game to some extent. And the more polarized we are shouting at each other and not listening, the more I think we feed into that game. But that's the second point, is I think we could all do such better jobs at listening not just to formulate our response and our answer back and all of that, but really trying to understand the other person. I find that if I listen to the very, very end, it's always that last half of a sentence where somebody really gives me the nugget, the thing that they didn't mean to say, but it just comes out, or I didn't realize I was going to tell you that kind of a thing. So if we can be not just patient, but really attuned, I think we can learn so much more about the other person, which in turn will help us be more persuasive if that's what we're trying to be.
Right. And I love what you were saying about really, kind of really make yourself listen, be there instead of thinking about what you're going to answer or trying to come back at something. But, like you said, listen to the very end and you might get that nugget. I love it. And it's so true that so many of us really don't listen, and I think even listening with our heart instead of our head helps as well, to try and have that empathy. We don't have to agree, but just to have that empathy really helps.
I completely agree. The idea that we actually care about the other human being, or even just a part of who they are, finding some kernel of goodness in them helps us have the interest in what they're saying, rather than just, like you said, shouting back.
Right. So for those people who are listening that aren't mediators, and knowing it's hard, like, between Thanksgiving and Christmas and all these holidays, getting together, what kind of advice do you have? Maybe some of our mediation tools that we can share. Listening obviously is number one, no question. But
Absolutely.
What are some other tools that people can use, for Christmas, for example, when they're getting together, even on Zoom with their family?
So the first thing that I think even comes before listening is recognizing that the relationship with the person that you're having the conversation with is more important than the content of the conversation. We get really caught up with content and we'll go to battle over being right about the content, or telling them that's not what I heard on the news or whatever. And we do that at the expense of a relationship. So we've got to constantly remind ourselves, these relationships, the family that we're around during the holidays, they matter, and we want to put them first. Then what that does, I think, is help us to listen better and to try and really understand where they're coming from and why they think what they think, which leads to the next point, which I think is asking questions. We, I think, get caught in a habit of advocacy. We're constantly just advancing something forward with simple declarative sentences or complex sentences. But so infrequently do we ever ask questions and say, help me understand that better, or tell me more about that, and what do you think will happen next if that happens, but just showing an interest and wanting to learn more, it actually empowers us. But I think some people think there's an old Calvin and Hobbes cartoon where he's talking to his stuffed doll and he gets more sentences out before the end of the comic strip than the doll does. And the doll makes a really good point at the end. And Calvin says, okay, you win that point, but I still got more words in. And I think sometimes we do that over Thanksgiving dinners and holiday dinners and the like. I think we're just wanting to outflank, out-talk the other person, out-shout them, out-reason them. And that's all pushing information out rather than bringing it in. And I love the I think it's a Zen expression that says when you're talking, you're simply repeating what you already know. And when you're listening, you're learning something you might not know. And that makes you a fuller person.
I love that. I love it. Like when you started out, like, tell me more about that. These are, see, they're the tricks of our trade, but really the open-ended questions, because it's hard when you're talking to your teenagers or something like that, and you say, so, did you have a good day today? Yes. It gets nowhere.
Right. Yeah,
But
so
if you
the
say,
open-ended
oh,
question.
what happened? What happened today? What's going on? Or
Yeah.
why are you thinking about that like that? I
Yeah,
really am
yeah.
interested. And I think those open-ended questions are wonderful. In fact, I just bought this thing, conversation starters, that I thought would be fun for the holidays, for
Great.
Christmas and everything. And they're just like really interesting. Like, what was your favorite thing as a kid? That sometimes when we get together with friends, we don't ask those questions. Or what was a really silly thing that you did, when you were in college, or, and I thought, I bought those because I don't often think of those myself. When I'm in mediation, I'll go, tell me more about that, or, help me understand, or all these wonderful things. But these I thought were especially great. So I bought it, for the holidays.
Such a great idea. I think it would also be really fun and a candid exercise for each person watching this to think about those conversations they have with those family members they have difficulty with. And if you or I were to pull them aside and say, let me just quiz you. You know the names of all their kids, right? And their wife's name. Do you know their siblings' names? Do you know what they really do for a living, like what their job really entails? And like, if we just ask them some simple questions about the person, my guess is they don't know a lot of those things, but they sure know where they stand on politics or sports or whatever it is that they're going to argue over. And so I think those conversation starters and diverting conversations to non-conflict topics is the best way to build a bridge and build a relationship, which is the foundation later for talking politics. If you want to do that, that respect, understanding is established.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get beyond this politics. And I think the other thing is really the pandemic. When people, I think, let's talk about what causes fear, at least as I see it, and I'm sure you do too, Lee J, is that when people are in fear, that can lead to anger. Fear of loss. You have a partnership disagreement, and immediately it's like, this is mine. And so let's talk about some of the things that really cause conflict.
Sure. So one of the things you hit on right there, anger isn't a primary emotion. Most people think it is because it's such a strong reaction in them, but it's not. It's a secondary emotion. Anger is there to cover up hurt or fear, like you said. So if somebody is afraid of something or feels insecure or intimidated by something, they're liable to be lashing out with anger just because of the fear. And if they're hurt, if you stepped on a nerve by mistake, or if their feelings are hurt, or they feel unappreciated or something, they're going to come back with anger a lot of the times. So when someone comes at you with anger, the smartest thing that you can do is say, what is it about them right now that's hurt or that's scared? And what if I could talk to them in a way that makes them less hurt or less scared? That's the best way to de-escalate that anger. You're getting behind it to the primary emotion, to what's really going on with them. The other thing is, and I love our friend and colleague Doug Knoll does this beautifully, is the affect labeling, which basically means saying what you're seeing in them. So you can look at them and go, wow, you're really upset. And have them say, yeah, I am, because blah, 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 blah. And then you can say, what about that upsets you so much? And then they're going to say, well, I hear this from people at work all day, or my wife is always telling me the same thing, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And if you follow that with the third magical question, which is, but specifically, what about it bothers you so much? Then they're going to tell you about themselves. They're going to say, my mom always talked to me like that when I was a kid, or something that's very personal to them. And now you're talking about them. You're not talking about the issue anymore. Whether it's COVID and masks or politics or, whatever the flavor of the day is that we're all fighting over, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really dangerous to be around a lot of conflict, because unless you can put up your golden shields and do these kinds of questions, it's very contagious, isn't it?
It is. It's hard not to get swept up in it. And, mediators like you and I, Mari, we've had decades of experience in sitting back and noticing what's going on in a room from an observer standpoint rather than a participant. And we can say, has everyone noticed that we've all gotten a little louder about this topic? Why do we think we're all so concerned about this topic? Or something like that as an observation. Mm-hmm. Which, they could still all turn and attack us for saying something like that. But noticing an observation or shifting the subject or something because you have the separation from it, rather than being right in it where everyone's playing, yeah, but. It's our favorite game at the holidays. Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? And as long as we're playing that, we're not actually engaging with each other.
Yeah, and so that's such an important point, to kind of separate it, change the subject if you possibly can. Just say, hey, we love each other, we're family. Let's let that go and talk about something else. Yeah. And then bring up something happy, like, look at the dog. Look at the dog. He just stole, a piece of turkey.
Exactly.
or something to divert. For us mediators, sometimes if it gets real hot in the room, I'll just say, you know what? This is time for just a little break. Let's go get some, nuts and coffee and cookies or whatever it is. Let's just take a break here and come back. And then when we come back, let's start anew, because we just have to take a break.
It's a great place for humor too, if it's appropriate humor. If you're not making fun of somebody or something, but you could even just say, "Woo, it's getting a little hot in here. How about we get some cold drinks?" And everybody might chuckle and have a moment of self-awareness from that, because we don't always realize when we're getting caught up in all of that.
Right. And for us, who's in the middle of conflict all the time, like you and I, who hate it, but we're always there because we grew up doing it. I think for me, and I don't know how you do it, but for me, sometimes they'll say something to me, that's offensive. And so I really work on like putting up like a golden shield around me. So that I can just take a breath. If I feel like I'm starting to get sucked in to that anger or that contagious conflict in the room, which it can happen. We're human beings, right? At least for me.
Right.
Maybe you're ahead of me in terms of you're an angel already, but for me, I have to just take some breaths and just kind of talk to myself like, okay, these people, this is not your issue. This is their issue, right? No matter if they're like mad at me, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you talk to us about it before? It's like, okay, if I get defensive, I'm not going to get anywhere, right?
That's right.
Talk about that with people for the holidays. If someone gets offensive with them, what are some things that you would suggest?
So you can always sidestep it with a little bit of humor, like, oh, look at you trying to push my buttons. Let's not do that right now. Is that okay? Or, gosh, you feel really strongly about this one. It's not that important to me. I'll tell you what, you get to win this one. And just, little things like that make them aware of what they've been doing and hopefully ask them indirectly not to.
Yeah.
Or, you could just be a little bit more straight and say, I know you're upset about this. I know it's important to you. And they may say, I'm not upset, but then they'll hear that too.
Right.
But it's easier for me if we can have this conversation just at a normal talking speed and thought, like, can we just have a conversation about this? Because I really want to understand where you're coming from. And I think that I know some things that maybe, aren't part of what you have experienced or whatever. Let's just have a conversation about this because I'm curious. And those things disarm people, just like the phrase, help me understand. Disarm people, right? You're not coming to attack them if you're leading with, help me understand, because I really want to. And then tell them what it is you want to know more, ask them what it is you want to know more about.
Yes, and that engages them too. That takes them from their amygdala, that limbic system that's ready to fight or flee or
Yes.
do whatever, back to their frontal lobes, because you've asked them a question, so now they have to think from their logical mind. Well, help me understand, and then they want to teach you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's beautiful. It's beautiful what they do. Let's
like
talk
it.
a little bit about, you're married and I'm married. So during this season, and especially since people have been kind of cloistered during the pandemic, let's talk a little bit about what you and I both do with our spouses when things get crazy. So I'll go first. There are times we had political differences, if you can imagine that. So that was really rough, and we decided that we wouldn't talk about that. So that was good. So whenever there's something that I think his buttons get pushed, for me, because I'm a mediator, I walk it every day. So, I guess my emotional intelligence in terms of having to practice all the time, that I'm probably a little bit more experienced. So, but when I see his button gets pushed sometimes, let's say I do say something stupid, that is offensive to him. Sometimes I'll say something and it appears that I'm nagging, which I'm really not, but let's say it does. So then I'll just go up to, if I see that he gets mad, I'll just go up and lean on him like my golden retriever does. When my golden retriever does something wrong, I'll just go and lean on him and say, let's not fight about this, in a very slow and low tone of voice. And it seems to work magic.
Yep, it does.
I've been with him 30 years, so I learned. But it's normal, right? That we're human. So you've been married a little less time, right?
So I'm not anymore.
Oh, you're not?
No, we split up about 6 years ago. I'm sorry to say, but interestingly, what you do instinctively with your husband is what I used to ask my ex-wife to do. I would say, if we're having an argument and you're feeling, distant from me, or you think that I'm upset and you don't want me to be or something, just come hug me. That will always work. It will never be, you'll never be pushed away. I just, anything that grounds us together in a relationship and reminds us what comes first, which is us, it just makes everything else go away. I think that's a really valuable tip.
Yeah. And I was married before too, so I didn't do that the first marriage, I think. I was married 18 years the first time, and now I'm with Lloyd 30 years. So, you learn, hopefully, we live and learn, hopefully, instead of just live. And so, all of us have to think about what is it that we want from each other, just like we're in a mediation. What is it that you really want?
Yeah. And, Mari, there's something else I've got to tell you about relationships that I see it across the board. People we give ourselves permission to treat our spouses and those close to us, our kids, our parents, and best friends sometimes, in a way that we would never treat a stranger. We take that intimacy and that access and that closeness, and we use it for evil sometimes. And we will lash out at them because sometimes it feels good. Your adrenaline's rushing, and you just want to get it out and yell at some because you've had a bad day or whatever. And we go home and take it out on those loved ones. And I think one of the things that we all have to get better at doing is having that moment of self-awareness when you can feel the surge of the adrenaline and you feel the anger coming on that maybe has nothing to do with the discussion you're in the middle of with your spouse or your loved one in that moment, a teenager or whoever, is to recognize it and to say, you know what, I just need a minute.
Right.
Give me a couple of minutes. Let me walk out of the room. Let me just take a little, walk and get some fresh air or something. I'll get something to drink or something. And then let me come back and let's finish this discussion. because you don't want to finish it the way you can start to feel it escalating. You want to finish it differently than it's about to start. And so having the moment of awareness to take that break and give yourself a bit of a time out and say, I'm about to be not my best self. And I don't want to be that, especially if it's going to push somebody away who's close to me, who I care about, who I love. And I think it's that moment of self-awareness. The last thing is, I was joking before about having the argument and saying, okay, you get to win this one. It's more important to you. One of my very, very best friends in the world, he and his fiance at the time used to fight and argue and bicker about everything, about who was right, how many, they would argue over angels dancing on the head of a pin. They would argue over, was that last car that passed us yellow or green? And they would like almost come to blows about it. I would sit in the back seat watching this happen as we're driving down the street, and I would just, how are these two ever going to get married? But they came up with this great thing that really helped them, and I think it would help a lot of people, is literally saying, time out.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this for you? And she would say, it's a 9. And he would say, for me, it's like a 7. You get it, whatever you want.
Right.
And put the relationship first and the importance of that issue in the hands of who the decision matters the most to. Now, if the same person is always claiming a higher number, or if one says 9, the other one says 10, I win, too often, that's obviously not being genuine in the relationship.
Right.
But it's a great way of just saying, like you said, let's not argue about this. That's kind of what that's saying too. And I think those are the moments of awareness that demonstrate to the partner, my relationship with you is more important than this thing, whatever it is that we're having this fight over.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, that we have to be aware. And sometimes, this is part of mindfulness, really.
Yes.
Being able to get in touch with those emotions, because you're going to feel the emotion in your body before you open your mouth.
Yes.
You're either going to get the tight shoulders or the red face, or for me, it's my solar plexus. I get this thing coming up, or people with their hearts, So I think it's really important to have that. I call it the pregnant pause, because if you're in a conversation and you can't leave, at least to just take a pause, be silent, breathe into that area, and then you'll get away from that,
sure,
get where you're ready to kill somebody. But would you believe we are already out of time? Oh my gosh.
Wow, that went fast.
Okay, we could go for hours and have fun with this, but how beautiful, how beautiful. Thank you so much. What a
My
wonderful.
pleasure, Mari. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank God there's people like us trying to find solutions and stop the conflict, right? So if we can
I
keep
agree,
teaching.
and I think we should hear by night, everybody who's listening and watching this, to take that responsibility themselves too.
Yeah, so give your website and then it's time to go.
Sure, it's easy. It's just mediationtools.com, all one word and plural. And it's being redesigned because it's a little outdated right now. But yeah, I'd love for people to email me if they want to at leejay, Leejay at mediationtools.com. And I'm always available.
Well, you're always wonderful too. So thank you so much, and we'll have you back again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.